Welcome, everybody, to Beyond the Shadows. We have a fantastic show coming up for you tonight. Strange Phenomena in Space. Coming up next. Welcome back, everybody, to Beyond the Shadows. I'm author and ghost historian Mike Ricksecker. We have a fantastic show coming up for you tonight. Strange Phenomena in Space. Yeah, we're kind of piggybacking off of the supernatural space phenomena video that was put out last night on the Haunted Road Media YouTube channel. So we're going to be talking about some of those topics and some others this evening. And I'm seeing down in the chat here that Sharon Lane has some wine and dark chocolate. And that's right up my alley. Pass some over here, please. I could really use some right now. But this episode of Beyond the Shadows is brought to you by Haunted Road Roast. It helps you hunt ghosts. That's our coffee. Yeah, Deadly Grounds is actually the roaster on that. They do a fantastic job. Haunted Road Roast is our own roast. Of course, it's actually a dark Vienna roast, and it plays kind of to a medium. You can find that out at our website, hauntedroadmedia.com. It's great stuff. So, all right, so let's go ahead. We have a lot to cover this evening on this show. Like I said, it's not just the topics I covered last night on that video on the Haunted Road Media YouTube channel, but you can go ahead and check out the video if you have not yet. It is what I call it, supernatural phenomena in space, because, supernatural activity, paranormal activity, what have you, does not just happen here on Earth. We talk a lot about the connected universe. Everything's connected. This phenomena does happen elsewhere, not just on Earth, although there are many reasons as to why it does happen on Earth, but there are many reasons as to why it happens out in space as well. So some of the things that I want to get into before I get into those topics from last night's video, some news that's actually relevant today. And, there's Sam Baltruse's books, which we had a wonderful time with him on Edge of the Rabbit Hole this evening. So please check out his books as well. Did you happen to see this stuff about Venus? The news about Venus is they may have actually found some evidence of life. And what's pretty interesting about this is that it's because of a type of gas that they have found within the atmosphere on Venus. Some of these different, tests that they've been running. These are similar microbes on Earth as they are now detecting in Venus's atmosphere. So, I'm not saying specifically that there is alien life on Venus. Venus is an extremely, extremely harsh climate to begin with. And where this would have to be in Venus's atmosphere is at a very high altitude that could give way to these different microbes. We're talking about, the way that a couple of the articles described it, it would basically be like a really kind of smelly type of bacteria, and it's like, okay. So it would be a type of life form, I suppose. So, very small-celled organisms, but still, that's a lot more than what we've seen on other planets within our solar system. So there may actually be some other kinds of life within our solar system that we didn't previously know. So this is actually pretty significant. Not necessarily supernatural, strange for sure, because we don't know exactly what it is, and this is like really just breaking news as of the last few days. Extremely interesting stuff. So what exactly is there on Venus now is another mystery, and we keep talking about Mars, but now Venus, which is actually closer to us than Mars, may actually have something going on there as well. So. And for those that watch The Expanse, is it the proto-molecule? Maybe it is. Probably not, though. All right, so other interesting news here that is recently come to light. It's kind of piggybacking off of some older news, but take it back here. And I know those that are listening to the podcast later will not be able to see these images. Like that was the image of Venus. This is the U.S. Navy photo of the UFO in 2004. And what I thought was kind of crazy about this recently, I mean, this is kind of old news. It was just recently here that, the Navy came forth here and said, okay, and they declassified and said, yeah, this was a UFO sighting. Is that some of the people associated this, like the fighter pilot that tracked this down, was actually saying that this craft being in our airspace was an act of war. And I just kind of looked at that, just kind of baffled. I mean, act of war. So just because the thing entered our airspace and is kind of looking around, we're supposed to take that as an act of war. And this actually got debated a little bit on my Facebook page because I threw the article up there, and I'm like seriously, act of war. But some of the comments that were thrown back were like, well, yeah, it breaks these different, treaties, and, they're crossing our borders, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's just like, no, wait a minute. Let's turn it around the other way. Let's say we send a probe to another planet. Is a life form on that planet automatically supposed to take our probe entering their atmosphere as an act of war? And the response was, well, we haven't found other life forms on, planets in our solar system. It's like, irrelevant. Let's just assume for a second there is. Or if we send a probe off into deep space where there is a life form, I can't accept at the moment we break their atmosphere that's an act of war just because we're sending a probe. We don't know the reason why this UFO was there. Apparently they jammed communications and what have you. But it's like, when we send, like ancient times, you send a scout to kind of look around, scout ahead or whatever and kind of look around. Is that really an act of war? No. A tourist goes somewhere and visits and looks around. That's not an act of war. So I just find it really bizarre that these people are automatically assuming that just because it broke into our atmosphere and it's flying around, it jammed our communications, that we have to take this as an act of war. Why immediately UFO act of war? No, it's just like if we were to send a probe somewhere, it's just we would just be generally curious. Let's check out this planet. There's nothing really to suggest that they weren't doing anything otherwise than just checking out the planet. We have no idea. There wasn't any sign of aggression. Just because they were jamming the frequencies, that's not a sign of aggression. That's just protecting themselves. Now, if they were to fire some shots at the jet fighter, then that would be an act of war. But they didn't do that. They just flew around and then disappeared. So the other one, these are kind of news items that have come up here. And this next one doesn't really have to do with space. Those other two were Venus and then this UFO. This other one I wanted to throw up there because it was just in the news today. And this is this Gettysburg ghost sighting. I don't know how many of you may have actually seen this video. And if you watch it, it looks like these translucent things are, kind of hopping around near the road. It's really hard to see in this still that I took of it. So I kind of circled it. And so you can kind of see like a blur in the middle of it. It's really hard to see. I think it's a hoax, and I'll tell you why. Look at the very bottom. You see that black dot? It's a shadow. Or at least it looks like a shadow. It basically, if you watch it as it's running, you'll see that black dot underneath it. as it's running around. So is it a shadow, or is it, possibly something that helped create this, image on the screen? It certainly isn't something ghostly if that shadow is sitting there following around on the ground like that. So I believe that this one, and it hit a lot of the different news sites today, but I believe this one was a hoax. B3 Aerospace saying CGI. And it looks like they're out there at night as well, which my recollection from the many times I've visited Gettysburg, you're not supposed to be driving around out there after dusk anyways. So, Victoria, shadow person's shadow. Yeah, probably not. But go ahead, check out the clip whenever you get a chance. Let me know what you think. But you see the little translucent things kind of bouncing around a little bit. And like I said, it's got the dot under there as if it's a shadow, which I think that whoever created this didn't realize it was casting that little shadow or whatever the little dot is supposed to be. And what's interesting is, of course, the person ends up stopping and getting out. All you hear is like they're monkeying with the camera on the dash. Like you hear this, or it's kind of like squishing around or rubbing against something, rubber or plastic or whatever. You hear all that, and you never hear the guy say, or whoever it is say, "Oh my God, what's that?" or "Whoa, I just saw something." There's no exclamation whatsoever. He gets the car, stops the car and gets out. Yeah, I don't buy it. So, yeah, Christian, nope, they frown against that. Been there, yeah, in regards to being out there after dusk. Yeah, in B3 Aerospace, when we were there, not allowed at night. Security guards, yeah, you're not allowed out there at night. So, and she's saying saw more during the daytime. Yeah, you can see things during the daytime. People have seen, what they thought were reenactments of the Civil War, and because they'd see like a formation of the soldiers marching off somewhere, and then they go, back to like the visitor center and say, "Hey, you guys had a great reenactment out there today. They performed really well, or they looked great, or whatever it is." And come to find out, there was no reenactment that day. So, yeah, I'm calling hoax on that little clip. And when they were out there, they were breaking the rules anyway. So, all right, let's get into some of this other stuff with strange space phenomena that was covered a little bit on the Haunted Road Media YouTube video last night. We'll cover some of that stuff tonight. Go ahead, throw some questions down in there or comments or what have you on strange supernatural space phenomena. There's some interesting stuff out there in the universe for sure. And toward the end, I'm going to get to some topics that were brought up on the Mike Ricksecker Facebook group that I'm bringing in here because I kind of asked that question, what's your favorite mystery out there in the cosmos and the universe, and we'll get to some of those topics at the end. Like I said, we're covering a lot of different things this evening. That was 3 of them right there in the first, I guess, 10 minutes of the show. So, yeah, EEQQ, lots going on up there. All right, so we're gonna get to the Space Angels. This is Salyut 7 back in 1984. The Russian cosmonauts up there. Was it day 154, I believe it was, outside the space station, there was suddenly this orange light that just grew out of nowhere. Very unusual, very strange. They're looking out the windows, and the light not only came in through the windows, but actually passed into the space station as well. Sharon Lane, Russian Scene, Angels was amazing. Yeah, it's really, really interesting. And when they ended up looking out the windows, and it was blinding them at one point, the lights coming in, not through just the windows, the walls, the lights blinding them. When they finally got their eyes adjusted and they could see and look out, they saw these very tall beings. They said they had wings, halos, so they basically called them the Space Angels or angels in space. It's basically whatever they were seeing, this is what they could relate it to. And so this went on for several minutes, and then subsided and went away. Well, a few days later, they had some others joined them. 3 more cosmonauts joined them from another ship, and the phenomena happened again. Orange light came up; it was blinding them. Now you had 6 cosmonauts that were all seeing this, and again, the new cosmonauts that were there are looking out, and they're saying these things are huge. I said they're at least as big as an airliner. So absolutely huge, tall beings that were very, very bright. And again, all they could relate it to were angels, because that's the way they look to them. Whether they're angels or not, we have no idea. Were they extraterrestrials? We don't know. Now, the skeptics will say, well, these people had been up in space a long time. I already mentioned, they'd been up there, 154 days. Then the others come along several days later, so now they're up there even longer. And so they're saying, well, they were hallucinating. Well, you had 3 hallucinated, supposedly, at first. And then several days later, 3 more come along. And now all 6 are hallucinating the same thing. So they're all having the same hallucination, supposedly. I find that a little hard to believe. What they saw, I could not tell you. I have no idea. Was it extraterrestrial in nature? Was it interdimensional? I mean, maybe. It could have been both. We've talked before about how many of these extraterrestrials could very well be coming to us from another dimension, across the universe, from another dimension, entering our space and time and appearing to us in different ways. This could be one of those ways, and they could be, peering in on us. Again, these things not doing anything harmful. They're just there, maybe observing, maybe watching. That seems to be what a lot of these entities turn out to be, is something watching and observing. The watchers, the shining ones. We could even get into that. Were these like the shining ones? We don't know. So definitely, very, very interesting phenomenon out here. Helena, I'm Russian. I've never seen angels. Nice. Very cute. Yeah, beat their airspace. They, quote unquote, they said they were hallucinations from too much oxygen. Yeah, and again, I kind of have an issue with that, because you would have all 6 having the exact same hallucination. Again, just 3 at first. And those 3 have that hallucination, the same exact type of hallucination, for about 10 minutes, and it goes away. And then you have 3 more join them days later, so the hallucination doesn't happen again until these other join them. And then now all 6 are suddenly having the same hallucination again for several minutes. It just seems a little bizarre to me that they all happen to see the same thing, and it becomes now all 6 like that. I don't buy it. I just don't. So it was something. I can't tell you exactly what it was, though. Sharon Lane, coming from another dimension, they can probably project whatever image they want. Possibly. Of course, this gets into speculation, because I've thrown out there before that I think with some of these things, when they access us from another dimension, they think that they might be cloaking themselves so that we can't see them. But because they may not understand our physiology, that cloaking doesn't come off as complete invisibility and comes off as different ways. Like I've talked about that with shadow people. That could be why some of these shadow people appear as shadows standing in the corner. They could be traveling from another dimension. It could even be the extraterrestrials coming down here, cloaking themselves, and they come off as a shadow to us because they're not completely cloaked to our eyes if they don't completely understand our physiology. Or we've heard some reports about quote unquote shimmer people, where something's kind of, maybe it's standing in the corner, edge of the bed, whatever, in the middle of a room, and you kind of see that heat signature and, that shimmer out of nowhere for no particular reason, and it's in the shape of a human being. Again, could be a similar type of thing where they're trying to cloak themselves, and it's almost perfect, but it's a type of a shimmer. So is that what happened here? Or seems a little, I will say that would seem a little weird that, if these quote-unquote angels are trying to cloak themselves and they came off of these huge, bright, shining things, I don't necessarily think they were trying to cloak themselves, but this is the way they appeared in our dimension, our space and time. I want to say our world, but, they were above the world. They were orbiting Earth. So, Victoria Monday, what if the angels were aliens who could travel through space, sans ship, and the wings were really some sort of flames that actually were some sort of propulsion or directional beam? It could very well be. It's kind of what I was talking about with, they could be traveling interdimensionally from another place in the universe, and this could be their method. Sure, it could be their method of transportation. And, with those cosmonauts, they may not be understanding what exactly they're looking at. And it could be so bright that they can't really see what exactly it is that they're looking at anyway. And the only thing in our minds that we could relate it to is, I think I'm looking at an angel. It kind of goes back to, even the ancients, when they encountered a culture with, such high technology, higher technology than their own, they could not grasp and relate what exactly it was that they were looking at. And so they kind of created in their own terminology with what they had to describe what they were looking at. I mean, the ancient alien theorists get a lot into that these different extraterrestrials are coming down, and the ancient cultures couldn't relate, and this is what they this is what they ended up describing. Maybe not, but when you see such disparate cultures coming together, when one is such a higher technology than the other, the lower culture or the culture that has a lower technology, can't quite relate exactly to what they are seeing, and so they describe it in other terms. And that could be what was going on with these Russian cosmonauts. What they were looking at, they couldn't understand completely, and so they just related it to angels, and we just don't know what exactly they were looking at. So, flames or the light being some sort of propulsional or directional beam, perhaps, very well could be. And yeah, like you're saying, Victoria, again, you can only define what you're seeing by your frame of reference, making your perception your reality. That's a much better way of saying it than what I was bumbling around with. So there we go. Okay. So that was one of the interesting stories from all that. Another one, okay, the Big Ear Radio Telescope. This was at Ohio State University. It's no longer there, so it has since been dismantled. But what was interesting about this? So this was part of the SETI project, which basically scans the universe looking for extraterrestrial life. And with this radio telescope, basically they're scanning the universe for radio waves. And generally, they don't get a whole lot. They're basically hearing a whole lot of nothing out of the universe. I mean, there's, kind of, the background noise of the universe. So, the different stars and planets and all that stuff give off different radio waves. And I was sent, some of that here just recently. QG, thank you very much. And so it's interesting to listen to. But with this incident here, they call it the wow signal. And basically what it was just out of nowhere was this strange signal that came from deep space, lasted for 72 seconds, and they were never able to explain it. And the astronomer at the time put wow on the side of that, circled it. And so it became known as the wow signal. Or recently here, a couple of years ago, there was an astronomer in Florida who basically tried to debunk that and say, well, it was a couple of comets. And this is met with great debate as well, because there's others have come along and said, well, yeah, except it wasn't exactly the same, and your comets were making, some intermittent signals, where this was just like a one-time blast and done. And so the data didn't exactly line up properly. So a lot of people that jumped on the whole comet idea, like, oh yeah, that's a great logical excuse. Sounds great. We'll take that. But there are plenty of others. And we're not talking, the people that are extraterrestrial fanatics or whatever. We're talking about, just astronomers that are saying, no, it doesn't line up. So this is still a great debate within the astronomical community of whether, of what this wow signal is. Like I said, some have jumped on the comet bandwagon, while others are saying, nope, this is still unexplained to us. We're not necessarily saying it's extraterrestrial, but we just don't know what it is, and we don't believe it was the comet idea. So that one's still out there, an unidentified radio signal from space. Victoria, did they bump the wow signal down to a jinky signal? Cute. Yeah, maybe they did. Still says wow in the paper, though. So, Papa Bear, a yoinks signal. Now we're getting to Scooby-Doo. That's awesome. So that one's still out there. And it's kind of interesting. We don't know what it was. Who knows? Maybe it was the space angels letting us know they were coming, and years later they came. Because time works differently out there in space, right? All right. So we also talked about in that video Achille and Giovanni Giudica Cordelia. Now these guys are kind of interesting. These were Italian radio enthusiasts. And basically what they were doing was they were monitoring transmissions coming from space, primarily in relation to the different missions going up into orbit. So they monitored a lot of the Russian activity. So when Sputnik 1 and 2 were sent up, Explorer 1, they monitored all those. There were other Russian missions that they monitored. Now, there's one that they caught that was an SOS signal. And what was interesting about that particular SOS signal was that it was moving away from Earth. So what they believe it was that, and this was significant about it, was this was before anybody had breached the stratosphere. Shortly thereafter, it was. But with this one, what the brothers believe is that because this would have been an involved death, and they didn't want to admit that this happened, is that they got somebody up there, but they weren't able to orbit. They kept going and going and going. And the astronaut, or I guess cosmonaut, that was in that capsule that got shot up was sending out the SOS signal. And like I said, it was getting further and further away from Earth. Of course, the Russian government denies this. There's also this one is extremely creepy. And this is the lost female cosmonaut. This was a transmission that they caught. And I include a minute of it, a little over a minute of it, in the video I posted last night on the Haunted Road Media YouTube channel. For the Patreon patrons, you guys got the entire clip on the Patreon site. So the whole thing's there, and it's like 2.5 minutes long. But I include a minute of it in last night's video on Haunted Road Media. I'll give you a snippet here. Basically, what's going on with this woman, so this would be a female cosmonaut, is she's losing oxygen. Her oxygen levels are depleting, and there eventually is a fire on the spacecraft. She keeps talking about being hot, and eventually she sees a flame and says that she's going to re-enter, so like re-enter the atmosphere. And she keeps wondering, she'll ask the question, isn't this dangerous? And asks if she's about to crash. I'm not going to play the whole clip. Like I said, it's about a minute long. I'll play you a little bit. It's pretty creepy. And I'll give you a little taste of it here. All right, that was a little snippet there, and apparently I didn't have it sized right, so you guys didn't see the captions underneath. Sorry. In the podcast, you're not going to see the captions anyway. But on the Haunted Road Media YouTube channel, you can get that. Like I said, it's about I think it's a minute and 12 seconds that I have in that video, the supernatural space phenomena, and then those on the Patreon page. You guys got the whole thing. So, and thank you, QG, for putting the link there. So, all right. So, and we are about halfway through the show. So I do want to throw out there that if you're listening to this on KGRAradio.com, we do appreciate you listening to us on KGRA Radio. So as for those listening to the podcast version later on this week, actually Saturday nights at midnight, Beyond the Shadows, KGRAradio.com. Edge of the Rabbit Hole, by the way, gets played Friday nights on KGRAradio.com, also at midnight. And so, yeah, QG has the links there to both the Patreon page and the Supernatural Phenomena in Space video. So thank you for doing that. Yeah, Nick Moulet definitely sounded unsettling. Yeah, it's extremely creepy. I first heard that clip, it was probably like I think I said mid to late 90s when I did the Patreon intro, but I think it was more specifically late 90s because I was no longer in the Air Force at the time. It was just after, actually. And when I first heard that, it was on some back end website out in the middle of the internet somewhere. It was kind of like the dark days of the internet, right? And I came across that, and I was like, whoa, because it was just so creepy. And just to think of what she would have been going through during that. And for a long time in the back of my mind, I've kind of retained, one of these days I'm going to write a fiction novel based on that. It would be pretty interesting. So of course, again, Russian government denies all that. There are many skeptics who believe that it was, a hoax, that they were just putting everybody on. And these brothers did these, they did their research and capturing these transmissions for a long time. I mean, at least a decade. And to this day, they still, maintain that. One of the brothers has already passed away, so he, maintained his stance to his grave, and the other is in his 80s and still says, yeah, this was absolutely legit. This is what we picked up. This is what we captured. So, they're maintaining this is all true. Now, of course, what government is going to admit when back in the day when you could really hide it? Who's going to admit, these failures like that? There are other ones that they picked up where, it was, they caught just breathing, that came across the transmissions. There were others when they sent animals up into the stratosphere. They caught some of those audio clips. Those really kind of crazy stuff. So Adam Tillery coming out of lurker mode to ask a question. All right. Okay, what if aliens are just residual ghosts of evolved humans from the future? Could be, right? Well, who's not to say that the aliens, I say the aliens, aren't just us. I think some of them, probably are. That, I think that there are other races out there in the universe that are related to us I'm not going to say every alien life form is directly related to us, but I think that there are other races out there in the universe that had the same initial origins as us. Now, I, of course, believe, we're all connected. I talk about the connected universe, so, spiritually, we're all connected somehow. As far as residual ghosts of evolved humans from the future, well, if time is all concurrent, then sure, why not? They'd be from the future at the same time as the present, at the same time as the past. We could get into all that, the stack time theory. Adam, it's certainly possible. I wouldn't even necessarily call them residual. They could even be intelligent haunts from the future. Victoria, Mike, I heard that the Challenger crew didn't die in the initial explosion and actually asphyxiated. That one's tough to talk about. How many of you remember like being in school and watching that on TV when it happened? I don't know. I mean, there are a lot of there are a lot of crazy stories that have come out of these different tragedies and disasters like that. I would say that Columbia, that's probably certainly true of Columbia, that they probably asphyxiated first before the entire shuttle broke apart. As far as Challenger, it's probably really hard to know because, it's going up and then boom. So did they start to asphyxiate for a moment before that happened? It's hard to know. But there's all kinds of stories and rumors, of course. Betty Lange, my uncle worked for NASA and was one of the people who had to talk to the families after. It was so hard for them. Yeah, I could imagine. B3 Aerospace was working for NASA at the time. Wow, okay. And yeah, that was 1986, January 1986. I was in 6th grade when that happened. So, yep, I recall. And Sharon Lane, Columbia was extremely difficult for so many people. Yep, I was working for Howard County Library at the time at the Columbia branch, and we actually had a plaque from the first Columbia mission, STS-1. Heck, I remember when STS-1 first went up. I remember watching that one on TV too. I was little. But we had that in the branch, and so when that tragedy happened with the Columbia shuttle, they held a little ceremony there with that plaque, since we had that there. Yeah, that was really sad too. So it looks like a lot of you had some connections there. So, and Candy Orton, her comment was for the Challenger, left launch pad 73 seconds later. Boom. Yeah. Well, and I was, for Challenger, I was a student in Massachusetts at the time. Krista McAuliffe was school teacher from a school in Massachusetts. And so that was a big deal for, all the teachers there in the state. And so, yeah, when that happened, everybody was just devastated. So, Tom McNicholas still has the original Columbia stamps. That's awesome. Yeah. So, Sharon Lane Columbia debris field was horrific. Yeah, it was just so widespread. It was everywhere. It was all over. All right, let's move on to because that was that's such a morbid topic. So let's move on here a little bit, and let's get to. Okay, so some of the comments from the Facebook group. So I was asking, what people want to, what their favorite kind of mysteries of the universe are, and so I had this photo up here, the wormhole. So wormholes. Portals, and Keith Bailey says portals really interest me. Christopher Stanton, alternative realities, portals, other dimensions. Yeah, so that's a really interesting mystery of space, and something that we talk about in other facets here on this show, on the Haunted Road Media channel, within my writing. I talked about it on the Alaska Triangle, the idea of portals, vortices. On Earth, we talk about that a lot with the telluric currents within the Earth, the energy grid, the Earth's energy grid, and how those vortices welling up from the Earth's magnetic core will create those portals. Well, you have this out in space as well. And so, a lot of people talk about, I showed the photo there of the wormholes. So with the wormhole, that would essentially be the theory that if you could bend space and time and basically, poke a hole through there, that you'd be able to travel from one point in the universe to another using that. The trick, of course, is how do you bend space and time? We haven't figured that out yet ourselves, but it is believed that other life forms around the universe may have already figured this out and are traveling here through these means, these different wormholes, portals, and what have you. And of course, a lot of skeptics kind of, call hogwash to that. But hey, many of these other life forms out there have had a head start on us. The Earth is only 4.5 billion years old. The universe is almost 14 billion years old. So you think that, well, they've got like what, a 9 billion year head start on us? They could figure out a lot of technology in that time. If it's one of the older, civilizations. You just give the age of our solar system here. This may not even be our original solar system here. We could very likely be spawned off from another solar system that we've already had to go around with all of this matter here. And that solar system was destroyed because solar systems do eventually become destroyed. And it ended up reforming to this one. And it's kind of this recurring cycle again and again. But specifically when it comes to, portals, other dimensions, alternative realities, these things are all into play, and definitely out there in space. We're experiencing them here on Earth. We are experiencing these, many of these different entities that are coming into our world through these means. You had ancient cultures that were trying to tap into this energy to be able to use it. Some believe that they were actually able to harness these portals, these gateways, these stargates, and were able to travel interdimensionally. And of course, over time we lost that know-how, that technology. And I think these days we're starting to open our minds again to recapture that knowledge, to be able to utilize these things again. So if that Stargate is here on Earth, that portal, that wormhole, whatever you want to call it, we're able to reopen that, then we're able to go to elsewhere in the universe. So definitely interesting stuff. So we'll be getting into more of that as we continue on with the connected universe, for sure. So this one here, Andrew Helton, in his comment on that thread, he says he wanted to know more about what is nothing. Based on the Big Bang Theory, everything was created in a central point 13.7 billion years ago. I said nearly 14 billion years, and is expanding outward. With light being the fastest traveling particle that we know of, our entire universe should only be about 13.7 billion light years away, making us encompassed in a large globe of light. So what is beyond that light? What are we expanding into? What is nothing? That is a great question. Of course, this is like one of those massive questions of the universe, right? You know, basically, what is the universe? Well, this is kind of how, you know, I try to think this, like the whole, what are we expanding into? I mean, it's kind of easy to say, well, we're expanding into space. Well, okay, what does that mean? As a computer programmer, I've done simulation programming. That's my degree, is simulation programming. When you're running a simulation like that, and I don't mean to simplify and put it into like a game space, because I'm not saying like this is the Matrix or we're all in a game, you know, or whatever, but to think of it in those terms, your space is basically confined to whatever the limits of the system are. You know, so, you know, because if you load up your system with too much, then you won't be able to run the program and the whole thing will just fail and lock up. Kind of like, you know, my computer was doing earlier today, and, you know, Sam's glitches and stuff like that. Well, this game space that we're in, we believe, is infinite. So the power behind this is just endless. It keeps going and going and going, or at least we have no concept of how huge it is. It's that massive. And I'm not saying it's a computer or we're in a computer simulation. I do believe that we are in a type of simulated universe, but I don't think it's like powered by machines and computers. I don't think we're like in the Matrix like the movies or whatever. I think that if we are in such a thing, it's more like organic or biological and not computer driven. Basically, we have come up with that idea because, you know, we're talking about the context of things earlier and what, you know, cultures could relate to. Well, right now, this is what our culture can relate to, is computers. And so that's what a lot of people have attributed to, but I don't think it's that. But I think the concept behind it is sound. And so with this, we have this just massively expansive area of play because the infrastructure behind it is just unfathomable. It's huge. And so it will keep expanding and expanding and expanding. Where does that lead to? So Christopher's talking about the Big Bang here. Boom, the Big Bang. So part of my conversation lately about the connected universe, and I'm getting more into this when it comes to the book that I'm in the middle of writing and coursework that I'm putting together, things like that. The oscillatory universe, and basically what this is. Start with the Big Bang. Well, eventually, the universe ends. What happens when the universe ends? You know, a lot of people are just like, well, it just fizzles out and then it's gone, right? Well, there's also the idea, if there's a big bang, then there's a big crunch. And basically the idea here is that the universe kind of comes back together and explodes again into another big bang. So it's like this infinite idea that, okay, what was before the Big Bang was the universe. It's the same universe, but it was just formed differently. And after it had its run, it basically came together, all that matter, boom, and exploded again into another Big Bang. And so around and around and around we go. So they call that the Oscillatory Universe. It has its detractors, just like every theory does. But there was an interesting study that some information was released about here a couple months ago. And that was the Anita Project down in Antarctica. This thing. And what they discovered were basically neutrinos running in the opposite direction of the way they should have been. Like, okay, what does this matter? Well, from their findings of, again, possible, we don't know for sure, but it had the hallmark of there being a parallel universe running in the opposite direction of our current universe. So I know it's kind of strange and unusual, but if you have, okay, take this big circle and you have, I'm going to get a little weird here because right now I have a drawing of it in there, but I don't have it digital yet. It's stuff that I'm working on. So if you have the Big Bang, and one universe going in one direction, one universe going the other, parallel to each other, but one's running backwards, one's running forwards. They eventually come again to boom, create another Big Bang, and you have this whole circle going around and around and around. So it's not that we're expanding into nothing. We are expanding into our own recycling of the universe. Basically, an endless loop again and again and again. What was before the universe was the universe. What's after the universe is the universe. The Hagman says, love when Mike gets a little weird. Thank you. We had some other questions come in. And where'd they go? All right. So, Betty Lange, do you think, Mike, we may have figured out in our human history how to travel to outer space, then some kind of someone destroyed the knowledge? So here's what I think. So I think there were ancient civilizations that had a kind of quote-unquote high technology. And we lost that knowledge because of global cataclysm, the flood. I mean, we know the deluge happened. We know the flood happened. And a lot of that knowledge was lost. And we've seen it. You look at the pyramids. You look at a lot of these different structures in ancient times that could not, we can't even do it today. Or we're just coming into the know-how and the technology and the strength to be able to do it today. The Trilithon at Baalbek we still can't do though. How did they move these things? We have no freaking idea. They had some sort of knowledge or technology to be able to do that we just don't have. That doesn't mean they had cell phones and computers. It doesn't even mean that they had rocket ships. But it means that they had some sort of high technology to be able to do this, and that knowledge was lost. So I think what happens is civilization starts increasing in population, technology, etc. Then something happens, global cataclysm, disease, whatever, boom. Population drops. People that knew how to do things are gone. The only people that are left are the people that know how to survive. Right now, if an EMP was to take out all of our technology right now, we lost our computers, we lost our cars, we lost our refrigerators, all that stuff. A lot of people would die because extremely large part of our population does not know how to just hunt, forage, whatever. Somebody might go out into the woods and try to forage and eat something poisonous and die because they just don't know. It would end up being the people that know how to do those things that would survive. But the people that knew how to do the higher technology jobs, like how to build a computer or a cell phone or, run the electric plant or whatever, a lot of those people would die off because they don't know how to just go out into the woods and survive. And so their knowledge would be lost. And so civilization would have to build back up. So that's, I think, what happened. Civilization would come up, something would happen, we'd lose a lot of people, they'd have to try to rebuild. Well, a lot of the knowledge from that previous civilization would have been lost because the people that survived didn't know how to do all of those things, just some of it, and they had to build back up. And so as technology began to increase again, it was different technology that they were able to develop because they took a different path this time. And I think we keep going up and down, up and down. We're reaching a point at the top. The pendulum, swings, right? We're up at the top right now. And at some point soon, we're going to be crashing back down. Could be a disease. Could be it could be a global cataclysm. It could be the overpopulation issue. I've said this before, we do need to figure out a way to get off the planet. Because there's only so much that we can handle here. And it will become a major issue. And, even if it didn't, at some point we have to anyway, because our sun will eventually engulf the planet and destroy Earth. It's going to happen. Billions of years from now. But it will happen. And it's something we will have to deal with. So, going out to other worlds and colonizing them and increasing our knowledge of space is a must. Okay, we cannot perpetually stay here on Earth. There is no forever here on Earth. It will die. Sorry. Victoria Monday. It's like when Mark Fiorentino said they recently discovered that the ether is real, but those of us doing metaphysical stuff have always known that the ether is real. Maybe lost info. Yeah, that's exactly it. It's even like with the ancient sites of power, how we're, kind of rediscovering that that those worked. The energy grid lines and how those points, had that energy that could be tapped into and used and utilized. And it's funny how some scientists come along and say, "Oh, we're discovering that this is a thing," and it's like, we've known that. If you've been listening to all the people that you say are crazy, then you would have known this a long time ago. But you need to go through your scientific studies or whatever. It's like, I think some people are too smart for their own good sometimes. So, get plenty of that. So, what are you guys saying? Nick Moulet, 5 to 7 billion years from now, the sun will turn into a red giant, eventually engulf Mercury, Venus, and most likely Earth. So trying to get off the planet will eventually be a priority. Yes, Nick, that's exactly what I'm talking about. When we become it will engulf Earth. As a red giant, it will get to the point of engulfing Earth, and then eventually, the star will die, become a brown dwarf. There's a whole cycle that it goes through. And eventually, out of the whole thing, a new solar system will be born at some point. It will be long since gone by then. So, all right, let's go ahead and wrap it up here, guys. This was an interesting discussion. I do appreciate all the questions and feedback. You guys are absolutely amazing. Please go ahead and check out the Supernatural Phenomena in Space video on the Haunted Road Media YouTube channel. You can get some of the stories that we talked about here and others in that video. And again, for those that have subscribed to the Patreon page at the $3 level and above, you get the full Cosmonaut transmission, Lost Cosmonaut translation there. So, all right, let's go ahead and get to those shout-outs. I want to thank, of course, Quarantine Goes for haunting the chat, feeding me all those great questions, and, of course, putting the links down there in the chat room. Always appreciate it. Deep Down the Rabbit Hole Patreon patrons, Tom McNicholas, B3 Aerospace, Andrew Cox, Dustin Samario, David Yeisley, and Joe Chandler. Thank you all very, very much for being Deep Down the Rabbit Hole Patreon patrons. And there's that Patreon link again, patreon.com/HauntedRoadMedia. All right, let's go ahead and get to the participants tab. Got Betty Lange and Candy Orton. Thank you both very much. Daniela Stas, thanks for joining us. Vielen Dank. EEQQ, thank you once again. Alina the Fam, thanks for joining us tonight. Mr. CO2, thank you once again. Nick Moulet and Papa Bear 001, as always. Fungi, great seeing you tonight. Sharon Lane is in the house, well as Christopher Stanton. That's Stanton's Journeys. Tammy Heitzman's here, as is the Haglin and Victoria Monday, my co-hostess from Edge of the Rabbit Hole. And Daniela is, hey, I'm a patron since this month too. Yep, so Daniela is able to watch that video. Yeah, Sharon Lane. Hey, Mike, Haunted Scotland 2022 Clan Grant. Maybe. We have talked a little bit about that. We're just trying to get 2021 underway, and that is Ireland. So still a few openings for that. There's Tim Schoen. Great to see you down there. Helen Espinoza as well. So one more time, this episode of Beyond the Shadows brought to you by Haunted Road Roast. Helps you hunt ghosts. All right. Betty Lange's wondering if there will be a show next week. Yes, there will. I'm on the road. I'll be coming back on Monday, so that's a weekend thing, Friday through Monday. But I will be back for next week's show. So let's see. Anybody else that may have missed here? I think that's probably about it. Was Tom McNicholas down? And I know Tom McNicholas was in earlier. And I don't know. How about Haunted Road Media's Fairy Queen? Is Diana Hilbert down in there? Jason King, good to see you. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. And is Adam Tillery lurking? He probably is. All right. And next week, I believe we have Jessica Potter, psychic medium, with us for Edge of the Rabbit Hole. So what's interesting about her is that she was actually there in Alaska on Elmendorf Air Force Base while I was stationed there. So that was kind of interesting. So apparently we may have crossed paths at one point. And Daniela, yes, guten Nacht. All right, everybody. See you next week. Same time, same place. You all have a great evening. Had a great conversation. And stay safe out there. Till next time.